Hey, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV, where we work on the second slur exercise. The first slur exercise was very foundational. It was appropriate for beginners, but also people who've been playing a little bit. This one is still probably within range of those people who've been playing for maybe 6 months as kind of a rough minimum, maybe 3 months if you're catching on pretty quickly. But I also think this video would be worth reviewing for those of you who've been playing for a while, because we go over some techniques like how to balance legato with staccato playing, detached playing, contrasting hand textures, which I think are just useful exercises for pretty much everyone. So let's get started. Our first exercise is mixing up slurs and staccatos with both hands. So this is sort of like a little bit more of a fancy version of what we were doing with slur exercise number 1, because we are doing essentially 5 finger scales, but it's mixed up and around a little bit. So it's not as simple as a 5 finger scale. But what you can see here is the C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C, C. There's your 5 finger scale going up and down right here. Now, one of the reasons this is more complicated is, well, for a couple of reasons. We're integrating slurs and staccatos. That's cool. We did that in the last slur exercise video. But we're also integrating left hand staccato notes. So we have this smooth passage in the right hand while the left hand's doing a totally different technique. Now, in the second half, we move off the beaten track of scales a little bit. We have still a 5 finger scale position. You're not making any leaps or jumps with the hand. We're keeping this basic. D, E, F, E, D, F, E, D, bup, bup. So you'll notice there's a pattern here where the first and third measures are completely smooth all the way across the bar line to staccatos. And then we're smooth all the way across the bar line to some staccatos. And the left hand consistently is very, you press it once and leave empty space. So let's practice this at the piano. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play through the exercise very slowly, and because none of these are going to be about speed. What I really want you to train yourself is to be able to hear the difference between a legato that hits all the notes or one that is kind of choppy and detached, or a legato that breaks at the bar line versus one that meets all the way across, that kind of thing. I want you to really pay attention to the difference between slurs and staccatos. Let's hop to the keyboard. Okay, so we're going to start with that right hand C 5 finger scale. There's nothing different about what you've already done in the previous one. Smooth all the way up. And when we get down, those 4 C's are each detached, and then we do another slur pattern, and then hop, hop, hop. Now the left hand is just going to be these little drops in the ocean, G and C. Now I'm going to put it together a little bit more slowly so that you can really pay attention to all of the details. Now, the challenges with this one are mostly coordinating when the hands are doing different things. So when the right hand is doing the slur motion and the left hand has to do a lifting motion. That's a tough technique to coordinate. We have the similar thing going on in measure 3, where one hand's continuing on, but the other hand is doing a quick lift. Be really careful when you're playing that you're listening to yourself and making sure your slur makes it all the way across the bar line before coming up. A lot of times this is what I'll hear. Do you hear there's a little hiccup before getting to that last note? So really pay attention to crossing the finish line. What you'll now notice with the second exercise is it's the exact same pattern of notes. The right hand is 100% the same with a couple subtle exceptions. So looking through the right hand, what you'll notice, there's no longer any staccatos. We've deleted all of the staccatos because what we're after is something that's going to sound a little bit more subtle. Instead of a ha, ha, staccato hop, we're going to just lightly detach the notes. It's harder to do this because lightly detached notes mean there's less space compared to staccatos, where there's a lot of empty space between each notes. So when you're lightly detaching, it's very easy to accidentally create a slur sound. But Don't fear, because one of the benefits of this particular exercise is that you're repeating the same note over and over again every time in the right hand. And this is really useful because you can't play legato with the same note. It's impossible. You have to lift no matter what. So it's a good way to practice detached. Now, the biggest danger spot to watch out for when you're trying it is this transition here from a C to a D, from measures 2 to 3. And the reason that this is a danger is because you actually could play this smooth. That C can move into the D without disconnecting. So I really, really want you to listen to your own performance very slowly to make sure that you're not making that mistake. Now, the other subtle difference that we made is we took out the staccatos from the left hand. Your left hand notes are exactly the same as they were, but again, we're going for subtlety now. Instead of a hup staccato and a bunch of empty space, you're going to be holding these whole notes, till the end of the bar. You're going to have a little bit of a lift, and then you're going to press it again, you're going to hold, and then there's again going to be a little bit of a lift. So they're also subtly detaching. And the danger spots for you here are going to be this transition from measure 2 to 3, same spot, because you could accidentally create a slur between a C to a G, and you could accidentally do the same thing from here to here. So pay really careful attention that you're creating those left hand lifts. And yeah, let's get to the keyboard and try this one out too. All right, so here's the exact same set of notes. And as mentioned, the left hand, we're just going to be holding for full volume while making sure to also create space between each note. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, lift. 1, 2, 3, 4, lift. 1, 2, 3, 4, lift. And then hold through the end. Okay, so the thing that's going to make this a little bit more challenging is what I already talked about with exercise 1. When you finish the scale, the tendency is going to be for your right hand to lift up one note too soon. Because what's going to happen is your left hand is coming up right around here. So your right hand's going to want to go in unison with the left and create a little bit of a hiccup that way. Here's what we're trying to do, all right? So it's a little harder to do this without staccato, which is why this is exercise number 2. I'm going to play it through now. Oh, I better play it up an octave. Now, what you're going to notice is not only is that going to be a potential challenging spot, but another potential challenging spot is going from measure 3 to 4. The temptation is going to be to create a slur in your left hand, copying what the right hand is doing, so they both slur together. You want to avoid that and lift up the left hand while the right hand's still continuing its slur. So you get the gap in the left, but the smooth sound in the right. The third exercise has a little bit of a different tactic. So now we're going to be doing something in parallel motion. And what that means is that both of the hands are doing the exact same notes. So if the right hand's playing a C, the left hand's also playing a C. Kind of like a parallel motion scale, perhaps, but with a little bit more variety. Now we're still staying in a 5-finger hand position, so you're not going to have to move around a lot. And there's no staccatos here. Instead, the main point of focus is creating phrase breaks. And what that means, phrases are marked by your slurs. So this here is a phrase marked by the slur. And creating phrase breaks means that not only do you play all the notes under the umbrella of the slur smoothly, but that in between these umbrellas, that one cut off some of the notes, you create a pocket of air. There's like a gap in the sound, a little bit of a breath. And you have 5, I think, 1, 2, oh, you have, sorry, I can, yeah, you do have 5. You have 5 little breaths in here marked by the triangles. Where you're playing everything smooth, the phrase ends, you lift the sound. You play everything smooth, the phrase ends, you lift the sound, and so on to the end. This is, again, just training your attention for that degree of detail, that you're hearing the empty space created by these phrase lifts, and that everything between these gaps are completely smooth. Let's go try it out. This next exercise is going to be a little bit longer, but it's, since I mentioned already, all in parallel motion, and we're not doing contrasting techniques, I think it's pretty doable. So really the idea is straightforward. Every time you have a phrase, you're lifting. So I'll walk you through the first measure. Lift. notice we had what was basically the equivalent of 3 C 5-finger scales. So that's easy enough. But what gets complicated when we get from measure 3 to 4 is having those quick lifts once you finish on the 8th note. So you were going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and lift. We have to get a quick lift in there without messing up our rhythm. It's a little break, and then this last one is tough. Yep. We're deliberately creating a little hiccup right before we land on that C. Okay, so this one is really just making sure your eyes are noticing the 5 units of where the slurs end, including that, I think, the hardest one, which is the very last lift. The 4th exercise is where the challenge really starts to pick up. It starts off innocuously enough, and like the others, you're in a 5-finger position, so you don't have to move the hands around. It's simple in that we just start with 3-note slurs. That's doable because it's one hand at a time. They alternate. The thing to watch for in the first two measures is that when one hand is slurring, the other hand is off. There's no drag. There's no tone in the right hand in measure 2. Just like in measure 1, there's no tone of the left hand at all. And we want to, where it gets a little bit more dicey, we want to create that same gap here, but the rest of the right hand passage, you have to create the gap while then the right hand plays, and then both hands have this overlapping slur, which is all well and good, except the beginnings and ends are quite tricky to make sure that the rests are being observed, that the hand that is not playing anymore comes up so that it creates empty space as opposed to dragging notes through the rests. This becomes a lot more challenging when the notes themselves are staggered and they're not happening simultaneously, which is why this is a little bit of a slight upgrade in difficulty compared to the last exercise. Let's go take a look at it. All right, so the challenge is to create a lift where the lift belongs, but also not to add an extra beat. So we're in 3/4 time, which means we want to count 1, 2, 3 up. 1, 2, 3 up. Whereas what's going to be really common, and a lot of people make this mistake, is they'll play 1, 2, 3, 4, and the lift gets a whole 4th beat all to itself. So be really careful when you're creating those phrase breaks that you're not adding a whole extra beat and changing the time signature of this piece. Okay. So like I said, the challenge is where we have to coordinate the rests between the hands. So the first challenge is where the left hand is resting and the left hand joins in. After we've already started, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And this ending is the next challenge because we're holding 2, 3, 1, and then the right hand has to get off after that first beat, but the left hand slur cannot break. So that little ending is a little bit tough. I'm going to play the whole thing through. Listen carefully. All right, the 5th and final exercise for slur technique is the most difficult of the set, and it's deceptively difficult because I think when a lot of people look at the sheet, oh, it's in C positions, 5-finger position. The left hand has to extend to a 6th here, and we have to jump to a 7th there, so there's some slightly more complicated things going on in the left hand. But at the same time, it's mostly held notes. It's not like the left hand is busy. I think the last exercise actually looks a little harder than this one. By the way, beginner modification. If you are, just starting out, you haven't been playing for very long, this might be a little intense. So just do the top note of the set. Don't worry about the bottom note at all because it'll still work. You'll still get the juice out of this exercise with that in mind. Okay, so what makes this one difficult is that when you're doing your whole notes in the left hand, you're going to lift them up and then press them back down again. So the duration looks something like this, where there's these little gaps between each one. They're not meant to be played as slurs. They're meant to be held for most of the measure, but you have to lift up the hand to change notes. Now that's fine. Most people can do that hand separately without a problem. Where this gets complicated is the right hand. We have slurs that go across the bar lines. Now, when you're doing the hands together, and this is very common for people to do, the tendency is going to be to play the slur and lift at the bar line just like the left hand. So you hold it and then there's a gap right here. like that. So your slur drops off at the bar line. As the left hand lifts, the right hand lifts too. So the big focus of this exercise is to practice that technique in particular, which again is why we can work on this only doing the top note. If you've been playing a little bit longer, you can do the bottom note, sure, why not? But we don't need it to learn this exercise. So let's try it out. Okay, so this last one is going to be the most challenging. Like I said, we can modify the left hand to, instead of being both notes simultaneously, the easier version will be to just treat the top notes, and we'll still get the points across with that. Now, as with slur exercise number 2.2, the second one we did today, we want to make sure that each of the half notes have a clear lift and we're not playing them legato. We're going 1, 2, 3, lift. 1, 2, 3, lift, and so on, making sure they're spacious. That's easy to do in a vacuum, but all of a sudden, once you're adding slurs across the bar line, this is the main thing we're practicing. We're going up, up, then we slur to up, up, then we slur to up, up, then we slur to up, up, hold. Okay, so getting that coordinated means the hands are doing opposite motions. The right hand is doing a smooth motion across the bar line while the left hand lifts. I'm going to do that in slow motion. Now notice how every left hand whole note was detached. I kept the bar lines smooth when the slur was indicated. And I also, there's some finger changes on the right hand. So the right hand's not quite as straightforward all the way through. I'm going to play it a little faster, this time just with the top note only, to show you what the simplified version is going to sound like. And again, this is totally fine to do it this way. The most important thing is that you're practicing weaving that slur all the way across. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Again, we want to avoid any issues with our slurs where maybe they hiccup at the bar line. We don't want that. We want the slur to come all the way across. So that's one thing that we're watching out for in this one. And one thing you can do, this is how I played it a little bit in this performance. We have no staccatos indicated, but I kept the quarter notes pretty tightly detached. The more aggressive your staccato, the easier it is because you're going to be going at extremes. Hop, hop. You're going to really force that lift and hear the contrast when you're listening back to it. If you want to play it a little bit more relaxed, you can just lightly detach. Something like that would work fine too. But again, when you're learning, getting those training wheels is really going to help to use those staccatos. As always, you can download today's materials at the Piano TV website, which you'll find linked below. I provide the PDF and the MuseScore file for free, so that you can get started working on that right away. There is another video on the way in this same series, so stay tuned for slur exercise number 3, which will be coming to you soon. I hope you catch us for that one as well. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, guys.